The doors to the world of the wild self are few but precious. If you have a deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old story, that is a door. If you love the sky and the water so much you almost cannot bear it, that is a door. If you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door. Clarissa Pinkola Estés. In the depths of winter, in the darkest hour before dawn, something ancient stirs. A woman wakes from a dream she cannot quite remember, but her heart is pounding, and there is mud on her feet, though she never left her bed. Another woman finds herself standing in her kitchen, knife in hand, seized by an inexplicable urge to walk out the door and keep walking until she reaches the forest. Another sits in her expensive car in the parking lot of her successful life and weeps for reasons she cannot name. These are not symptoms of pathology. These are the first tremors of remembering. The wild woman is calling from the bone house of the psyche, from the place where she has been imprisoned, starved, and forgotten. And she is patient because she is older than civilization, older than agriculture, and older than the gods we call by name, but she will not remain silent forever. Clarissa Pinkola Estés, contadora of the old stories, spent her life gathering the tales that grandmothers whispered in kitchens, that survived inquisitions and migrations, and that were written in no book, but carried in blood and bone. She is herself descended from multiple traditions, Mexican and Hungarian among them, each carrying its own way of speaking about the unspeakable, of naming what cannot be tamed. When she released Women Who Run with the Wolves in 1992, it was as though she had found the key to a door millions of women had been standing before without knowing how to open. The book spread like wildfire, passed from hand to hand, recommended in whispers, "Read this, you need to read this." What Estés offers is not advice or technique. She offers something far more dangerous: permission. Permission to be hungry, to be angry, to be difficult, to be wild. Permission to trust instinct over instruction, to honor the body's wisdom over the mind's control, and to choose soul over safety. This permission is so radical, so threatening to the structures that depend on women's domestication, that the book cannot be fully understood without first understanding what has been done to the wild woman and why. The wild woman archetype is not a metaphor Jung made up, not a poetic flourishing, and not a way of speaking about something else. She is as real as hunger, as undeniable as rage, and as necessary as breath. She is the instinctual nature of women, the part that knows without being taught, that sees through lies, that will sacrifice everything for freedom, but nothing for approval. Our ancestors knew her intimately. They built temples to her fierce face. They understood that she was not separate from the sacred, but was the sacred in its most primal, unmediated form. Then came the great forgetting. It happened slowly, over centuries. First, the goddesses were replaced by gods. Then the gods became singular, masculine, and transcendent. The body became suspect. Nature became something to be conquered rather than communed with. Women became property, their wildness a threat to order, their knowledge declared witchcraft. The burning times were not an aberration. They were the logical conclusion of a civilization that could not tolerate the wild woman's existence. How many women were burned, drowned, hanged, or disappeared? The numbers vary, but the message was clear. This is what happens to women who do not submit. This is what happens to women who heal, who prophesy, and who refuse to be silent. This is what happens to women who remember the old ways, who speak to plants and animals, and who understand that divinity dwells in the flesh and not in spite of it. The terror was so complete, so effective, that even now, centuries later, women carry it in their cells. The fear of being too much, too loud, too powerful, too wild, this is ancestral memory, trauma inherited and passed down. The wild woman went underground, but she did not die. She cannot die. She is too fundamental, too woven into the fabric of what it means to be female. Instead, she speaks through symptoms. The depression that descends like fog and will not lift. The eating disorder that turns the body into a battleground. The addiction that promises escape but delivers only deeper captivity. The rage that erupts without warning, shocking even the woman who feels it. These are not signs of weakness or pathology. These are the wild women, caged and starving, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be freed. Estés understood this with the clarity of one who has descended into the underworld and returned. She knew that women were not suffering from a deficit of self-esteem or faulty thinking or chemical imbalance, though these might be present. They were suffering from soul loss, from exile from their own nature, from living in a world that required them to betray themselves daily to be deemed acceptable. And she knew that the cure was not more domestication, more control, or more trying to be good. The cure was in the stories, the old stories, the ones that tell the truth. She begins with Bluebeard, and immediately we are in territory that makes the comfortable squirm. A young woman, naive and curious, meets a wealthy man whose only flaw appears to be his peculiar blue beard. He courts her with gifts and attention. Her sisters think she should marry him. Everyone says he is a good catch. Only the beard is strange, an unnatural blue that should warn, but doesn't. She marries him. Shortly after the wedding, Bluebeard must travel on business. He gives his young wife the keys to the castle, telling her she may go anywhere, open any door, and enjoy everything except one small chamber in the cellar. That door must never be opened. He gives her the key even as he forbids its use. This is the mark of the psychic predator. He gives you just enough rope to hang yourself, sets up the test disguised as trust, and waits. The young woman tries to resist. She explores the castle, enjoying her freedom, but the forbidden door calls to her. This is not weakness or disobedience. This is instinct, the deep knowing that something is wrong, that what is hidden must be brought to light. She opens the door. Inside, the floor is sticky with blood, and hanging from hooks are the corpses of Bluebeard's previous wives, murdered and butchered like animals. This is the secret chamber that exists in every psyche, the place where we keep what we are not supposed to see. Here lie all the dead parts of ourselves, the dreams we killed to be loved, the power we surrendered to be safe, and the truth we agreed not to speak. Here are the previous versions of us that did not ask the hard questions, that chose niceness over perception, that died to make the predator comfortable. The chamber is always locked. The key is always given. And the woman who does not use the key is already hanging on a hook. She simply doesn't know it yet. When the young wife pulls the key from the lock, it is covered in blood that will not wash off. She scrubs it, but the blood remains. This is the indelible mark of forbidden knowledge, the stain that says you cannot unknow what you now know. You have eaten from the tree. You have opened the door. You are no longer innocent, and innocence was the price of admission to this false paradise. Bluebeard returns, sees the blood on the key, and knows she has disobeyed. He is not surprised. He is never surprised. This was always the plan. He prepares to kill her, to add her to his collection. She begs for time to say her prayers. From the tower, her sister watches the road, waiting for their brothers to arrive. "Sister, sister, do you see anyone coming?" The wife calls. "I see nothing but the sun making dust, and the grass growing green," comes the reply. Time stretches, prayer becomes ritual, and it becomes incantation. Finally, the brothers arrive and kill Bluebeard. Estés insists we understand this story in our bones. Bluebeard is not just the abusive husband, though he is that. He is the force in the psyche that kills women's connection to their own knowing. He is the voice that says, "You're too sensitive, you're imagining things, you're crazy." He is the internalized predator who murders creative impulses before they can take form, who sabotages every attempt at freedom, who insists that safety lies in not knowing, not seeing, not speaking. Every woman has made a deal with her inner Bluebeard at some point. She has agreed not to look too closely at the relationship that feels wrong, the job that is killing her soul, or the family dynamics that poison every gathering. She has agreed because the alternative, seeing clearly, would require her to act, and action would cost her the illusion of security. Better to pretend the beard is just an unusual shade of blue. Better not to open that door. But the naive woman is being prepared for slaughter. The predator has no loyalty, no mercy, and no gratitude for her compliance. He was always going to kill her. The only question is whether she will see it coming, whether her sisters will help her watch the road, or whether her brothers, the masculine animus forces within her psyche, will arrive in time. The blood on the key is her salvation, even as it seals her fate with Bluebeard. She can no longer pretend. She must fight or die. Learning to recognize the predator, both external and internal, is the first task of reclaiming the wild woman. The second task is learning to trust intuition, the deep knowing that the modern world has trained us to dismiss as irrational. For this, Estés turns to Vasalisa the Wise, a Russian tale that maps the territory of initiation with precision. Vasalisa's mother dies when the girl is young, but before she goes, she gives her daughter a doll and instructions. Keep the doll with you always, feed it when you eat, consult it when you are troubled, and it will help you. The doll is intuition made tangible, the voice of the deep mother preserved across the threshold of death. Vasalisa's father remarries, and the stepmother and stepsisters despise her, as stepmothers and stepsisters do in these old stories, not because they are inherently evil, but because they represent the psychic forces that hate the soulful, the authentic, and the alive. One day, the stepmother deliberately lets the fire go out in the house, then sends Vasalisa into the forest to Baba Yaga's hut to fetch fire. This is a death sentence. Baba Yaga is the wild witch of Russian folklore, the ancient crone who lives in a hut that stands on chicken legs, surrounded by a fence made of human bones topped with skulls whose eyes glow in the dark. She is ancient, terrifying, and powerful. She devours those who come to her unprepared. The stepmother knows this. She is sending Vasalisa to die. But Vasalisa has her doll. As she walks through the dark forest, afraid and alone, she feeds the doll scraps of bread and asks what she should do. The doll guides her, telling her which path to take, how to approach the hut, and what to say. When she arrives at the fence of bones, 3 horsemen pass, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 black. These are the dawn, the day, and the night, the forces that measure time itself. Vasalisa is at the threshold between the human world and the world of the eternal. Baba Yaga's hut spins on its chicken legs, the door facing away. Vasalisa must speak the ritual words to make it turn and face her. This is important. One does not simply barge into the realm of the deep feminine. One must know the protocol, must speak the language, and must approach with respect, even when terrified. The door opens. Vasalisa enters. Baba Yaga, with her iron teeth and penetrating gaze, demands to know why the girl has come. Vasalisa explains that she needs fire. Baba Yaga agrees to give it, but only if Vasalisa completes a series of impossible tasks. She must separate mildewed corn from good corn, and poppy seeds from dirt, clean the house, and cook the food, all by morning. The tasks are deliberately impossible. No human can complete them. But Vasalisa has her intuition, and while she sleeps, the doll does the work that conscious effort cannot accomplish. This is crucial. Intuition works below the threshold of consciousness. It sorts, discriminates, and separates, spoiled from sound, without the ego needing to understand how. Women who have lost their intuition try to figure everything out with their rational minds, analyzing and second-guessing and making lists. Meanwhile, the real work, the sorting that happens in dreams, in the body's knowing, in the sudden certainty that arises without explanation, is not happening. The doll must be fed. Intuition must be tended. Otherwise, you arrive at Baba Yaga's door empty-handed, and she devours you. Morning comes. The tasks are done. Baba Yaga is satisfied but suspicious. She asks Vasalisa questions, probing, testing. How did you accomplish these tasks? Vasalisa wisely says, by my mother's blessing. She does not reveal the doll. Some knowledge is not for sharing, not for explaining, and not for the scrutiny of others, no matter how powerful they are. Then Vasalisa, emboldened, asks Baba Yaga her own questions about the three horsemen. Baba Yaga answers, explaining they are her servants. My bright dawn, my red sun, and my dark midnight. But then Vasalisa almost asks another question about the pairs of hands that appear to do Baba Yaga's bidding. The doll begins to jump in her pocket, warning her. Vasalisa stops herself. I will not ask, she says. You have said that too much knowledge can make a person old too soon. Baba Yaga is impressed. It is good that you asked about what you saw outside my house, and not about what is inside my house. I do not like my dirty laundry aired. And I eat the over-inquisitive. This is the lesson of discernment, of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to pursue knowledge and when to respect mystery. Not all doors should be opened, not all questions should be asked. The wild woman knows the difference, the naive woman does not, and she pays for it. Satisfied, Baba Yaga gives Vasalisa fire contained in a skull whose eyes burn with inner light. Vasalisa thanks her and sets off through the forest, the skull lighting her way. When she returns home, the fire from the skull's eyes looks at the stepmother and stepsisters, follows them wherever they try to hide, and by morning has burned them to ashes. What is false, what is cruel, and what has tried to kill the soul, these are destroyed by the fire of deep seeing, the illumination that comes from surviving the initiation. Baba Yaga is the wild woman in her most terrifying form. She is not the nurturing mother, not the gentle teacher, and not the mentor who holds your hand. She is ancient power, amoral as nature itself, and dangerous as a lightning strike. She will give you what you need if you approach her correctly, but she has no patience for fools and no sympathy for the unprepared. She sets impossible tasks because life sets impossible tasks. She demands that you work beyond your capacity, that you access resources you didn't know you had, and if you come to her without intuition, without the doll your deep mother gave you, she will devour you. This is not cruelty. This is the law of the wild. Women have been taught to fear women like Baba Yaga, to see power as unwomanly, and to equate femininity with sweetness and accommodation. The wild woman is neither sweet nor accommodating. She is the surgeon who cuts away dead tissue so healing can begin. She is the forest fire that clears the underbrush so new growth can emerge. She is the dark mother who devours, as well as births, who knows that death and life are not opposites, but partners in the same dance. To reclaim the wild woman, women must make peace with their own Baba Yaga nature, the part of them that is hard, demanding, and fierce. They must stop apologizing for taking up space, for having standards, and for saying no without explanation. They must become dangerous, not in the sense of doing harm, but in the sense of being ungovernable, untamable, and unwilling to shrink to make others comfortable. But the wild woman is not only fierce, she is also the deep feminine that knows the life-death life cycle in her bones, that understands nothing stays and everything transforms. For this truth, Estés turns to the skeleton woman, an Inuit story that teaches what happens when we stop running from death. In the time before memory, a woman did something her father did not like what she did. The story does not say, and in punishment, he took her to the edge of the ice cliff and threw her into the sea. The fish came and ate her flesh, picked her bones clean, and she sank to the bottom of the ocean, where she lay forgotten, her skeleton tumbling in the current, rearranging itself into proper form. One day, a fisherman came to those waters. He had fished all the usual places and caught nothing, so he traveled far from home to try his luck in unknown waters. He cast his line, and it sank deep, deep down to where the skeleton woman lay. The hook caught in her ribcage. The fisherman felt a great tug on his line and thought he had caught the biggest fish of his life. He pulled and pulled, and the skeleton woman rose through the water, her bones rearranging themselves, her skull rolling, and her fingers dragging. When she broke the surface, the fisherman saw what he had caught and was terrified. He turned his kayak and paddled frantically toward shore, the skeleton woman tumbling behind him in the waves, now her head leading, now her legs, the bones reorganizing as she was dragged along. The The fisherman ran to his snow house, dove inside, and gasped for breath in the dark, grateful to have escaped. But when he lit his oil lamp, there she was in the corner, a heap of bones, seaweed still draped over her ribs, the fishing line still tangled around her. He looked at her for a long time, and something shifted. His fear began to transform into something else, not desire exactly, but a kind of acceptance, a recognition. He began to gently untangle the fishing line, carefully freeing her bones. He arranged them in proper order, with care and respect. Then, exhausted by the day's events and the intensity of his feelings, he fell asleep. As he slept, a tear formed beneath his closed eyelid and slipped down his cheek. The skeleton woman, watching him, saw the tear. She was parched, so terribly thirsty after her long years in the sea. She pulled herself across the floor on her bones, and she drank the tear. And drinking it, her heart reformed in her chest. She drank another tear, and her flesh began to grow back. She reached inside the sleeping fisherman and pulled out his heart drum, and she began to drum on it, singing herself back to life. Flesh, 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 flesh. She sang herself alive. By morning, she was whole again, and she returned the heart to the sleeping man and lay down beside him. When he woke, she was there, warm and breathing, and they were entwined, and they lived together from then on, both well-fed. This story contains mysteries that can be turned over for a lifetime and never fully exhausted. The skeleton woman is the life, death, life nature, the aspect of the wild woman that knows decay is not the enemy but the partner of growth. She is what is left when everything soft and decorative has been eaten away by time and circumstance. She is the truth that remains when the illusions are gone. She is death, yes, but death as transformation rather than ending. The fisherman hooks her by accident. We do not consciously choose to encounter death in nature. She comes to us unbidden in the ending of relationships, the loss of jobs, the failure of dreams, the illnesses that strip us down, and the grief that empties us out. Our first response is always to run, to try to escape, to paddle frantically back to the shore of the familiar. But she follows. Of course she follows. She is hooked to us now, tangled in our line, and running only makes the entanglement worse. The fisherman runs until he can run no more, and then, in the privacy of his home, by the light he chooses to kindle, he looks at what he has caught. This is the moment of transformation, when we stop running and turn to face what we have been fleeing. The skeleton woman is terrifying because she is true. She is the relationship stripped of romance, the body stripped of beauty, and the self stripped of persona. She is what remains when the performance is over. And the fisherman does something extraordinary. He untangles her with care. He arranges her bones with respect. He does not try to revive her, does not try to fix her, and does not flee again. He simply tends to what is, with gentleness and presence. Then he sleeps, and in sleeping, he weeps. His tears are not tears of horror, but of recognition, of grief, of the full feeling that comes when defenses drop and the heart breaks open. The skeleton woman is dying of thirst. Death itself is thirsty for our tears, for our willingness to feel, to grieve, to acknowledge what has been lost. When the fisherman's tears come, his capacity to feel deeply, to be moved, to be broken open, she drinks them, and they give her a heart. Then she reaches into him and drums on his heart, calling herself back to life. She does not take his heart. She borrows it, uses it, and returns it. This is the alchemy of relationship with the life, death, life, nature. It breaks your heart open, and in that breaking, both life and death are transformed. By morning, the skeleton woman is flesh again, warm and whole, and they are together, entwined, and both well fed. This is what happens when we stop running from death, from endings, from the parts of our lives and ourselves that have been picked clean by circumstance. We are fed by the relationship with death nature. We are made whole by acknowledging what has died and must die. We are brought back to life, not by avoiding the skeleton, but by tending her with care. The culture teaches women to fear death in all its forms: aging, endings, loss, grief, and the fallow times when nothing is growing. We are supposed to stay young, keep relationships alive, past their natural span, never quit, never stop producing, and never acknowledge that something in us has died and needs to be composted before new life can emerge. This is a recipe for exhaustion, for the half-life of pretending everything is fine while dragging corpses behind us. The wild woman knows the life-death life cycle intimately. She knows when to let go, when to grieve, and when to lie fallow. She knows that the field that produces year after year without rest becomes depleted, that the tree that never drops its leaves in autumn has no energy for spring. She knows that death is not the opposite of life, but part of its rhythm, and that trying to live without dying is like trying to breathe, only in and never out. Eventually, something ruptures. La Llorona, the weeping woman of Mexican legend, shows what happens when grief has no container, no witness, and no permission to be fully felt. The story is told many ways, but the core remains. A woman drowns her children and then spends eternity wandering riverbanks, wailing for what she has lost. She appears as a warning. This is what happens to women who cannot control their emotions, who let grief drive them mad. But Estés asks the questions no one wants to ask. What happened before La Llorona drowned her children? What unbearable circumstances, what impossible choices, and what complete absence of support led to that moment? What was stolen from her? What was demanded of her? In some versions, her lover abandons her for a wealthier woman. In others, she is indigenous and her children are mestizo, and she drowns them to save them from a life of persecution. In still others, she is simply driven mad by poverty, by violence, by the grinding impossibility of her situation. The wild woman knows that sometimes grief is all that remains. Sometimes the only honest response to what has been taken is to wail, to tear clothing, and to refuse consolation. La Llorona is every woman who has been told to pull herself together, to think of others, and to get over it. She is what happens when grief has no place to go, no one to witness it, no permission to exist. She becomes a ghost, a warning, a figure of terror. Her grief, denied and repressed, possesses her until she is nothing but grief, wandering eternally, unable to rest. The culture fears women's grief. It fears what women might do if they truly let themselves feel the depth of what has been taken from them, their bodies, their children, their autonomy, their voices, their lives. So grief must be managed, contained, and processed quickly and quietly. Women are given a brief period to mourn and then expected to move on, to be strong, and to focus on the positive. This is violence disguised as help. The wild woman grieves fully. She howls. She tears her hair. She does not move on until the grief has moved through her, and this takes as long as it takes. She does not apologize for her grief or try to make it palatable for others. She knows that unexpressed grief becomes depression, becomes illness, becomes the ghost that haunts every moment, even when you're pretending to be fine. But grief is not the only forbidden emotion. Rage, too, has been stolen from women and then pathologized when it returns. The wild woman's rage is sacred, necessary, and medicinal. It is the no that draws boundaries with teeth bared, that says this far and no further, that will destroy what threatens rather than submit. Estés speaks of rage as one of the wild woman's finest weapons, and she means a weapon literally, a tool for protection, for clearing ground, for burning away what is dead or false or parasitic. Women have been trained since birth to suppress rage, to be nice, to smile, to accommodate, to consider others' feelings even when those others are harming them. Anger, they are told, is unbecoming, unfeminine, and ugly. So they swallow it, push it down, and pretend it's not there. And the swallowed rage doesn't disappear, it festers. It becomes depression, anger turned inward. It becomes anxiety, the constant vigilance required to keep the rage suppressed. It becomes physical illness, the body trying to discharge what the psyche won't allow. It becomes addiction, the desperate attempt to numb what cannot be felt. When rage finally breaks through, it terrifies everyone, including the woman feeling it. She doesn't recognize herself. She's capable of violence she didn't know lived in her. She says things that cannot be unsaid and breaks things that cannot be repaired. And immediately, the culture descends with diagnoses: borderline, histrionic, out of control. She needs medication, therapy, and anger management. She needs to be brought back into line. But what if the rage is appropriate? What if it's the only sane response to years of violation, years of being diminished and dismissed and used? What if it's the psyche's immune response, attacking what is invaded and harmed? The wild woman knows that rage is information. It tells you where your boundaries have been crossed and where you have been too soft, too willing to let others feed on your life force. It mobilizes energy for change. It burns away false peace. The Red Shoes story maps this territory with devastating precision. A poor girl longs for red shoes, impractical, beautiful, wild red shoes. They represent the soul's desire, the longing for beauty and expression and visibility, but she is shamed for wanting them. She's told to be grateful, to be good, and to wear sensible black shoes like a proper girl. She submits. She gives up the red shoes. She chooses to be acceptable. But then she's adopted by a rich old woman, and at the woman's house she finds red shoes and puts them on, and the red shoes begin to dance. They dance her through the streets, through the churchyard, and through the forest. She cannot stop. She tries to take them off, but they will not come off. She dances until she is exhausted, until she is dying. Finally, in desperation, she has the executioner cut off her feet. Even then, the red shoes dance on without her, the severed feet dancing away while she watches, footless and unable to participate in her own life. The story is usually told as a warning against vanity, against wanting what you shouldn't want, but Estés reads it as a map of what happens when women deny their desires for too long. The desire for the red shoes is not vanity. It is the soul saying, I want to dance. I want to be seen. I want beauty and expression and joy. But the girl has been taught that this desire is wrong, is selfish, is too much. So she suppresses it. She wears the black shoes. She is good. But the desire doesn't die. It goes underground, becomes toxic, and becomes compulsive. When she finally gets the red shoes, they possess her. The desire that should have been integrated, honored, and given appropriate space has become an autonomous complex that controls her. She cannot stop dancing because she was never allowed to start, never allowed to dance in a healthy, bounded way. The severing of the feet is the ultimate tragedy. She cuts off her ability to move through the world, to dance her own dance, and to walk her own path. And even this doesn't stop the shoes. The dancing continues without her, a terrible image of the life force that is being lived, but not by her, the vitality that exists, but she has no access to. She has sacrificed her feet, her foundation, her ability to stand on her own, and gained nothing. The desire still dances, but she is crippled, watching from outside her own life. The wild woman knows what she wants. She does not apologize for her desires, or try to convince herself she should want something else, something more acceptable. She wants what she wants with the whole force of her being, and she claims it, takes it, and makes space for it in her life. She wears the red shoes, yes, but she also takes them off. She dances when it is time to dance, and rests when it is time to rest. She is not possessed by her desires because she has not denied them. This is the difference between healthy wildness and destructive compulsion. The woman who honors her desires remains in a relationship with them. The woman who denies them is eventually overtaken by them. It is better to want openly, to claim your longings, and to pursue what calls to you than to pretend you have transcended desire while it eats you alive from within. The ugly duckling teaches about the agony of exile and the necessity of finding one's true home. The duckling is not ugly. He is different, hatched in the wrong nest, raised among those who cannot recognize what he is. They judge him by duck standards. Can he waddle properly? Can he quack? Can he paddle in the pond? And by these standards, he fails utterly. He is too big, too clumsy, and too strange. His own mother is embarrassed by him. The other ducks peck him. The chickens mock him. Even the cat and the hen, when he seeks refuge in the old woman's house, ask what use he is. He internalizes their judgment. He believes he is defective, that something is fundamentally wrong with him. He cannot see that the problem is not his nature but his context, not his inadequacy but their inability to recognize what he is. So he tries desperately to be a better duck, to fit in, to become acceptable. It doesn't work. It can never work. He is not a duck. Winter comes. He suffers alone, freezing, starving, nearly dying. Spring arrives. And one day he sees swans flying overhead, and something in him knows, even though he has never seen swans before and has no word for what they are. He is drawn to them with a force he cannot resist and cannot explain. He expects them to reject him too, expects them to kill him for his presumption. But when he approaches, they recognize him immediately. They welcome him. They see him as one of their own. And when he looks at his reflection in the water, he finally sees what they see. He was never an ugly duckling. He is a swan. How many women have spent their lives trying to be good ducks when they were meant to be swans? How many have allowed themselves to be judged by standards that do not apply, in contexts that cannot hold them? How many have believed they were defective when they were simply exiled, misplaced, or hatched in the wrong nest? The wild woman is not interested in becoming a better duck. She is interested in finding her true kind, even if it means leaving everyone she has ever known, even if it means winter alone, even if she almost doesn't survive. The pain of exile is terrible, but the pain of living in the wrong place among those who cannot see you is worse. It is a slow death, a grinding down of the spirit, a daily betrayal of the soul. Finding your true kind requires enormous courage. It requires being willing to be alone rather than tolerate the wrong company. It requires trusting that somewhere your people exist, even when you have never met them. It requires refusing to shrink to fit, refusing to perform normalcy, and refusing to betray your nature for belonging that is contingent on your inauthenticity. The seal woman in the sealskin soulskin story knows this truth. She is a selkie, a woman who is also a seal, who lives in the ocean but can shed her skin and walk on land. One night, she and her seal sisters come ashore, remove their skins, and dance beneath the moon. A lonely hunter watches them and is transfixed. He wants a wife, and he knows that if he steals one of the seal skins, the woman will have to stay with him. So he does. He takes the skin and hides it. When the seal women return to their skins and plunge back into the sea, one cannot find hers. She searches frantically, but it is gone. Without her skin, she cannot return to the ocean. She is stranded. The hunter appears, offers shelter, and offers marriage. She has no choice. She agrees. She bears his children. She keeps his house. She fulfills all the duties of a wife. But something is wrong. She grows pale, listless, wan. She stands for hours staring at the sea. She is drying out, dying from being too long away from her true element. The hunter sees her suffering but does nothing. He tells himself she will adjust, that she loves him, and that this is better for her than the dangerous ocean. He is lying, and he knows he is lying, but he keeps the skin hidden. Years pass. Their child finds the hidden seal skin and brings it to his mother, not understanding what it is. The moment she touches it, everything changes. The life comes back into her eyes. She is transformed. She puts on the skin. She returns to the ocean. She leaves her husband and children behind without a word. She is not cruel. She is starving. And she has been starving for so long she almost forgot what being fed felt like. The sealskin is the wild woman's essential nature, the thing without which she cannot truly live. For some women, it is their creativity. For others, it is solitude, or wild places, or the company of women who speak truth, or work that matters, or freedom to move through the world uncontained. Whatever it is the thing they were convinced to give up to be loved, to be married, to be good, and to fit into the role assigned to them, and they made the trade believing they could live without it. They were wrong. The Seal woman's depression is not a disorder to be medicated. It is the soul's accurate response to living in exile from itself. The cure is not better coping mechanisms, or more gratitude practices, or reframing her thoughts. The cure is returning to the sea, even if it means disappointing everyone, even if it costs everything. Because the alternative is a living death, a dry, gray existence that looks fine from outside, while inside you are drowning on dry land. This is what Estés means when she says the wild woman is essential to women's health. Not a luxury, not something to be cultivated when there is time after more important things are handled. Essential. Like water, like air, like the sealskin, women who are cut off from their wild nature develop symptoms. They are not sick, they are exiled. And the cure is return, reclamation, the courageous act of taking back what was stolen or surrendered. But return is not simple. It requires descent, the journey into the underworld that every initiatory tradition knows. Estés turns to the story of the Handless Maiden to map this territory. A poor miller makes a deal with a stranger who promises to make him rich in exchange for what stands behind his mill. The miller thinks he is trading a worthless apple tree. He has actually traded his daughter. 3 years later, the stranger who is the devil returns to claim her. But the daughter has wept so much that her tears have washed her clean, and the devil cannot grasp her. Enraged, he demands the father cut off her hands. If she has no hands, she will be sullied, and he can take her. The father is weak, greedy, and complicit. He obeys. He cuts off his daughter's hands. The maiden, now handless, leaves her father's house. She wanders into the forest with her arms bound in clean gauze. She survives by eating pears from an enchanted tree that bends down to feed her. A king finds her, falls in love, marries her, and has silver hands made for her to replace what was lost. She bears a son. Everything seems resolved. But the devil interferes again. While the king is away at war, the devil forges letters that make it appear the queen has given birth to a monster and should be killed. The king's mother, trying to protect her, sends different letters. The devil intercepts and forges again, until finally a letter arrives saying the queen and her child should be killed. The king's mother cannot obey. She helps the handless queen and her baby escape into the forest. The queen wanders deeper into the wilderness, living in poverty, caring for her son alone. 7 years pass, 7 years of hardship, of managing with no hands, of doing what seemed impossible. And then, one day, she reaches into the water to save her child from drowning, and her hands grow back. Not the original hands, those are gone forever. New hands, grown from necessity and suffering, and refusal to give up. Eventually, the king finds her. The devil's illusions are dispelled. They are reunited. But the queen has been transformed by her years in the wilderness. She is not the innocent maiden he married. She is a woman who has survived mutilation, exile, and poverty. She has grown her own hands back. She has learned what she is capable of. Estés sees in this story the mutilation women undergo when they are too good, too obedient, and too willing to sacrifice themselves for peace. The father who cuts off his daughter's hands is every parent who teaches a girl to diminish herself. Every culture that amputates female power and calls it virtue. And every force that says women must give up their ability to grasp, to hold, to create, and to defend themselves in order to be deemed acceptable. The handless years are the time of wandering, without the capacity to shape one's own life, to protect oneself, or to reach for what is needed. The silver hands are beautiful, but false, a prosthetic that looks right, but cannot truly substitute for the real. Only in the wilderness, only through years of doing the impossible without hands, Only through the act of reaching desperately to save what she loves do the true hands grow back. This is the initiatory pattern Estés sees across cultures and stories. Separation from the ordinary world, descent into darkness, time in the wilderness, suffering what seems unendurable, and finally, transformation and return. The maiden who left her father's house is not the woman who returns to the king. She has been to places he cannot imagine. She has survived what should have killed her. She has grown her hands back through her own effort and grace. She is whole in a way she never was before the mutilation. The wild woman knows that wholeness is not the same as perfection or the absence of wounds. Wholeness includes the scars, the years of wandering, and the knowledge that comes only through suffering. It includes having been handless and learning to live anyway, learning what you can do with stumps wrapped in gauze, and learning that you are more resourceful than you ever imagined. Throughout all these stories runs the constant rhythm of life, death, life, the cycle that cannot be escaped. Estés returns to it again and again because it is the central mystery, the truth the culture most wants to deny. We live in a civilization that worships growth, expansion, youth, and accumulation. We have no patience for fallow times, for the death that must precede rebirth, or for the composting that turns last year's growth into this year's soil. Women especially are taught to resist the death phase of the cycle. We are supposed to stay young, keep relationships alive past their natural span, never quit, and never stop producing. We are not allowed to lie fallow. We are not allowed to say this thing has died, and I am letting it go. The culture demands that we reanimate corpses, that we pretend things are growing when they are rotting, and that we smile and say everything is fine while we are dying inside. The wild woman knows better. She knows the field that produces year after year without rest becomes depleted. She knows the fruit tree that is not pruned puts all its energy into dead wood. She knows the snake must shed its skin to grow, and the process is uncomfortable, and for a while the snake is vulnerable, but the alternative is being strangled by what no longer fits. She knows the dark goddesses, Kali, with her necklace of skulls, dancing on Shiva's corpse, Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, naked and mourning in her dark realm, Hecate at the crossroads, torch in hand, guiding souls through transitions. These are not evil goddesses, they are necessary goddesses. They preside over the death phase, the transition, and the threshold. Without them, there is no transformation, only stagnation. Estés speaks of the work of descent as essential to psychological and spiritual health. The ego cannot transform itself. It can only manage, control, and maintain the status quo. Real transformation requires going below the ego into the deep psyche where the wild woman lives, where the old gods still speak, and where the dead are not gone but waiting. Women who resist descent end up having it forced upon them through illness, crisis, or loss they cannot avoid. Depression is often a forced descent, the psyche shutting down the upper world because the descent is required and will happen one way or another. Better to go willingly, Estés suggests, to treat the descent as a sacred journey rather than a catastrophe, to understand that what feels like falling apart may be the necessary dismantling that precedes reconstruction. In the underworld, we meet what we have exiled, the grief-mad, rageful sister, the devouring hunger we have tried to starve, the sexuality we were taught to be ashamed of, the power we were told was unfeminine, the selfishness we were convinced made us unlovable. All the parts we cut off to fit, to be good, to be loved, they are waiting in the underworld, and they are not happy. The work of descent is to face these exiled parts, to bear witness to their suffering, and to acknowledge what we did when we abandoned them. This is excruciating work. It is easier to stay on the surface, to keep busy, and to maintain the persona, but the parts we abandon do not disappear. They become autonomous complexes, living their own lives in the unconscious, sabotaging our conscious efforts, creating symptoms, and demanding attention through illness and compulsion and repeated patterns we cannot seem to break. Only when we descend and meet them, when we stop running and turn to face what we have fled, can the frozen places begin to thaw. Only when we acknowledge the grief can it move. Only when we give the rage permission to speak can it tell us what it knows. Only when we embrace the shadow can it stop possessing us from behind. This is the truth Jung spent his life exploring. What we repress does not disappear, but gains power in the unconscious, and eventually it erupts. And the eruption is always worse than the original feeling would have been. The man who represses his aggression becomes passive-aggressive, undermining others while claiming innocence. The woman who represses her sexuality develops hysteria, the body speaking what the psyche will not allow. The one who denies their shadow projects it onto others, seeing evil everywhere but within. The wild woman embraces her shadow. She knows she contains multitudes, that she is capable of both creation and destruction, both nurturing and devouring, and both love and rage. She does not pretend to be only light. She knows the light is only visible because of the darkness, that wholeness requires the integration of opposites, and that you cannot be truly good if you are not also capable of evil. This is the hard teaching that the culture resists. We want to believe we are only good, only kind, and only generous. We want to think of ourselves as the hero, never the villain. But the truth is, we are both. We are capable of tremendous love and tremendous harm. We have saved and we have destroyed. We have been the victim and the perpetrator. Until we acknowledge this, until we embrace the full range of what we are, we remain split, at war with ourselves, and unable to access our full power. Estés insists that women reclaim their full range. Not just the acceptable emotions, not just the pretty parts, not just the nurturing, selfless giver, all of it. The rage, the sexuality, the greed, the ambition, the coldness, the capacity for violence, these are not things to be ashamed of. These are powers, and powers can be used well or poorly, but they must first be acknowledged and claimed. The creative life is central to this reclamation. Estés sees creativity not as a special talent, but as the wild woman's natural expression. To be cut off from creativity is to be cut off from soul. The culture is expert at cutting women off from creativity through shame, through the demand for perfection, and through the insistence that real work is practical and marketable. The wild woman creates because she must. She does not wait for permission or the perfect circumstances or confidence. She creates from necessity, from the overflow of life force, and from the images and stories and songs that arise in her, whether she wants them or not. She makes bad art and good art, and art no one will ever see. She creates not to be famous or validated, but because not creating is death. This requires protecting the creative fire, tending it without smothering it. Too little fuel and it dies. Too much anxious attention and you kill it. The creative process has its own rhythms, its own needs. Sometimes you plant, sometimes you harvest, sometimes the field must lie fallow and nothing grows, and you think you will never create again. But the fallow time is necessary. The roots are growing deeper. The soil is being renewed. The next crop is being prepared below the surface where you cannot see. Our culture recognizes only one season, production. Always be making, always be improving, and always be monetizing. The soul cannot survive this. The wild woman knows that creativity has seasons, and forcing constant production exhausts the source. She creates in bursts and then rests. She fills the well and then draws from it. She honors the rhythms of her own nature rather than trying to conform to external demands. Estés speaks too of the importance of finding your pack, your true kin, the ones who recognize you. The wild woman cannot thrive in isolation from her kind. She needs witnesses, needs others who understand the language she speaks, who see through the performance to the truth underneath. This is why women's circles have persisted across millennia. This is why consciousness-raising groups felt revolutionary. This is why, even now, women seek each other out to tell the stories that cannot be told in polite company. But here is the paradox. You must be willing to be alone to find your pack. You must risk rejection by the civilized world to find the wild ones. The ugly duckling does not find the swans by staying in the barnyard hoping the ducks will accept him. He has to leave everything he knows, wander through winter half frozen, and nearly die before he finds the others like him. This is the price of authenticity. You may lose people who loved the false self, who needed you to stay small, and who cannot tolerate your growth. You may be called selfish, crazy, or difficult. You may spend time alone, wondering if you made the right choice, wondering if the swans even exist. But the alternative is spending your life among those who cannot see you, performing normalcy while dying inside, sacrificing your soul for belonging that is contingent on your self-betrayal. The wild woman chooses loneliness over false connection. She chooses authenticity over approval. She chooses soul over safety. And eventually, if she persists, if she refuses to shrink back into the shape others demand, she finds her kind. They recognize each other instantly, the way swans recognize swans. No explanation is needed. No performance is required. The recognition is immediate, cellular, and undeniable. All of this, the stories, the initiations, the descent, the reclamation, is in service of individuation, Jung's word for the process of becoming whole. Individuation is not about becoming unique or different from others. It is about becoming fully yourself, about actualizing the potential that was always there in seed form, and about removing the obstacles to your own nature, rather than trying to become something you are not. The wild woman is not a goal to achieve, but a nature to uncover. She is already there, has always been there, waiting beneath the conditioning and the trauma and the domestication. The work is not to create her, but to remove what obscures her, to strip away the false, to say no to what does not serve, and to reclaim what was stolen or surrendered. This is why Estés calls the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. Not women who become wolves, not women who metaphorically connect with wildness, women who run with wolves, who joins the pack, who move through the world with the wolf's instincts, the wolf's fearlessness, the wolf's loyalty to kin, and the wolf's capacity for both fierceness and play. The wolf does not apologize for being a predator. She does not pretend to be vegetarian to make the sheep comfortable. She is what she is, fully, unapologetically. She lives by her nature, not against it. And she is beautiful in her wildness, in her full expression, and in her refusal to be anything other than what she is. This is what Estés offers: permission to be wild, instruction in the old ways, and maps of territories the culture has declared off-limits. She offers the stories that remember what we have forgotten, that carry the medicine women need, and she offers the assurance that you are not crazy, not defective, and not too much. You are exiled, yes. Starved, yes. But also alive, still howling, still longing for the forest. The wild woman is calling. She has been calling your whole life. She calls in dreams where you run on four legs. She calls in the restlessness that will not let you settle. She calls in the hunger that no food satisfies. She calls in the rage that erupts without warning. She calls in the grief that empties you out. She is calling you home, to yourself, to the truth of what you are beneath all the lies. The question is not whether to answer. The call will not stop. The question is how long you will resist and at what cost. Because the cost of domestication is high: depression, anxiety, addiction, illness, and a life half-lived. The cost of wildness is high too: exile, rejection, and the lonely journey through winter. But one cost leads to death, the other leads to life. The wild woman is waiting. She has all the time in the world. She is asking only one thing: will you remember? Will you come home?